Hello, everyone. Dumelang, Sanbonani, Molweni. Welcome to this webinar on the University of the Future after the pandemic. In case you do not know me, I'm Professor Mamokgethi Phakeng, and I'm the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Cape Town, which is hosting this webinar with sponsorship from 2U. How do we educate in a world of massive change? In 2018, UCT established a futures think tank to consider how best to prepare our university in South Africa for the potential changes that the fourth industrial revolution would bring. Our conclusion was that as an institution, as a sector, we must be disruptive. Either we recognize that change is here, that it is necessary, and that we should steer that change to help our country and continent through the future, or we lose the initiative that is available to us now. If we do not create the disruption and guide it, we will be disrupted from outside. COVID-19 has proven the truth that of that conclusion, but it is not the only disruptive element we are facing today or we have faced in the past few years. As educators, we recognize that our world is in great need of change. We are facing global-sized problems, climate change and sustainability of energy resources, poverty and inequality, even in the more affluent countries. Gender inequality and gender-based violence, migration of people from areas of war and economic need, urbanization and strain upon infrastructure and resources like water, electricity, housing, waste disposal, and roads. The general collapse of public trust in leadership, which suggests that most people no longer believe presidents, CEOs, or even university leaders are credible. We also recognize that our students have changed. They are no longer the same as the students of the 1980s, 90s, and even the 2000s. They belong to what I call Generation C, which is not an age group, but a technology-based generation, which inhabits a world of videos, memes, mashups, and social media. They have embraced a set of attitudes, values, and behaviors that are completely different from mainstream or traditional views, especially those in the Western world. Change, of course, is just another word for transformation, which is a process of helping one another to become the best that we can be for our own good and that of our society. This is a process that never ends. As uncomfortable and disruptive as the pandemic has been, it also forces us to consider higher education, among other things, from different points of view. It may even reveal opportunities that we would not otherwise have seen or would not otherwise have grabbed if we were comfortable. This is why we are here today, to explore different perspectives and discover new insights about higher education. We are privileged to hear from 4 experts in higher education. They bring perspectives and experiences of different countries where they have worked. Professor Remenyi, he's an alumnus of UCT. He has published 2 books on the University of the Future, drawing on contributions from 40 academics in more than 15 countries. He's also publishing a series of autoethnographic studies of academics during the COVID-19 crisis and a book of case histories on innovation at various universities. He has had a number of honorary professorships in the United Kingdom, Republic of Ireland, Sweden, and South Africa. We also have Dr. Lakshmi Nair, who is an assistant professor of research at the Department of Business and Management of Luis Guido Cali University in Rome, Italy. Dr. Lakshmi's primary areas of expertise are qualitative management and organizational research methodology, as well as business and organizational ethics. And then the Right Honorable Lord Willetts, who is a fellow of the Royal Society, the president of the Resolution Foundation, and author of A University Education, published by Oxford University Press. He served as Member of Parliament in the UK from 1992 to 2015, and as Minister of Universities and Science from 2010 to 2014, and his experience serving in the British Treasury and the number 10 policy unit contribute to his perspective from within government. He is, of course, an academic in his own right. He's got a number of honorary doctorates and is currently Chancellor of the University of Leicester. Finally, Professor Niyi Awofeso, who is a Professor of Health Administration at Hamdan bin Mohammed Smart University in the United Arab Emirates, and an active practitioner of smart learning approaches. He holds a university degrees in health sciences, medicine, business administration, public health, and health administration. He previously worked at universities in Nigeria and Australia. Colleagues, I welcome you all, and we are so delighted to have this distinguished panel to be talking to us this morning. But we will hear first from Professor Remenyi. Over to you, Professor Remenyi.
I need to say that again. Thank you very much indeed, Vice-Chancellor. In beginning this, kicking off this discussion, I just want to tell you a little bit about the research that went into the production of the two books. The books were, this project was motivated by the realization a couple of years ago that there was an enormous level of criticism of universities right throughout the world. There were incidents of universities being in trouble in the United States for taking bribes to admit students who shouldn't have been admitted. There were all sorts of hassles in the UK about finance fees, the salaries of high office bearers. There has been an ongoing situation in South Africa between the students and the universities. I suppose the thing that triggered my annoyance with the criticism was there was a case in the UK where a student took the university to court to sue them for having awarded her a Mickey Mouse degree, and she was awarded £60,000 as a result of that. So I felt that what we might be able to do was to put together a positive case for how the university should operate in the future. Now, I'm involved with a conference company, and we have a list of 40,000 research active academics, and we sent out a call for chapters. And this resulted in a book being published in January 2020. The book was fine except for one reason, and that was that the words COVID-19 did not appear in the book. So immediately we relaunched the call for chapters, and we decided to call the second book, The Response to COVID-19, the University of the Future. And that was published about 9 months ago now. We are carrying on with this research. We have two projects that the Vice-Chancellor has mentioned, one to do with case histories of success in university initiatives in the last couple of years, and another one which I have just started, and I started it as a result of getting an email from a member of staff, actually from a Portuguese university, who it was really quite a disturbing letter about the difficulties he'd been experiencing during the COVID crisis, and how dreadful the job had become, how the students were extremely difficult, etc., etc. And I kind of realized that there are stories there to be told by academics which should get into print about how difficult this period has been. Now, I have been given 10 minutes to introduce the book, and it's an impossible task. I have a series of slides, and I'm going to talk to those slides for 10 minutes, and then I'm going to stop. And I'm going to invite the other speakers to come to make their contribution. And what I can't get to address in my 10 minutes, I'm going to hope that will be addressed during the questions. So right now my task is to share the screen with you. And here goes what I was told to do. This is a 10-minute presentation on the issues that were raised within these two books. There is no doubt that the university enterprise over the last so many hundred years has been enormously successful. When one thinks about the achievements that have been made through scholarship, through research, through the dissemination of knowledge, they have been enormous. I'd like to express this in terms of a narrative. The sociologists tells us that a organization is a physical representation of a narrative. So what is the narrative of a university? Well, the narrative of the university is that education, learning, knowledge, whatever we want to call it, is an extremely important path to both personal and societal success. That universities are, amongst other things, engines of innovation. And that innovation includes social mobility, which is an extremely important part of their function. Universities have supplied us with the flow of expertise which has been necessary to create and sustain the complex society that we have today. But there have been issues. One of the issues is that the university sector is enormously expensive. And secondly, there's a lot of duplication in the university sector. I wonder how many departments of English we have and how many departments of mathematics we have doing very much the same thing, which could be easily rationalized. Universities have become large and complex organizations. In the literature research, literature reviews research that I did leading up to this book, I came across several people who were of the view that universities were so big that nobody in them really understood their entire function or operation. They have become multi-processes, multifunctional, multi-agendas, multinational. And it's also pointed out that the objectives of certain parts of the university can be contradictory to other parts of the university. And it is an enormously complicated affair. There's also a feeling, an impression that university culture has begun to honor research more than education. Now, I know that is regularly denied, but there is a certain amount of evidence for that. The criticism of universities still persists. I came across two books whose titles basically stunned me. The first one was called The Great University Con, and the other one was The End of College. Being an American book, what it meant the end of universities. I do not believe in either of these, but I think there is a case to be answered to make sure that nobody is confused. So on top of this already tricky situation, which the Vice-Chancellor has already pointed out, we then have to accommodate what happened during the COVID-19 crisis, which incidentally is by no means over anywhere. And I suspect we're going to have to live with the implications of that for quite a few years to come. No one needs to be reminded about the enormous disruption. Anything that involved human proximity was hit over the head in a very big way. And of course, that puts universities right on the spot. A number of people said, well, thank goodness for video conferencing. Video conferencing has saved the universities. And it's surprising how many senior people in the university sector said something similar to that. Well, it has transpired that video conferencing is fine as remote emergency teaching. But the complexity of university life is just too great to be for us to be able to replace it by simple video conferencing. Three principles come out of the book, out of the two books. The first one is that many aspects of the university operation can be improved. There is scope for a lot of reform, and that the main issue is imagination. We really need to reimagine how we can deliver education in the way we have always done in the past. Secondly, we really want to look at the technology issues. Again, the Vice-Chancellor mentioned this earlier on. There is a lot of scope for the use of technology in a number of different ways. I'm not a great believer in artificial intelligence. I believe it has been massively overhyped, but nonetheless, there is a lot of learning computer aids that can be employed that we don't do. Finally, I'd like to make the point that I am very much against the notion that we want to bounce back. I think we want to build better. We want to come back in a different way. Just going back to where we were before, I don't think answers many of our problems. So I have a whole list of items here that were raised by the various papers in the books. I think I would summarize them by saying that the first lot were to do with the learning processes. And there were many people arguing that the universities are not sufficiently learner-centric, that we need to develop learning-centric ecosystems. And that revolved around several really important, almost philosophical issues. The first one is that a university education is really about self-development, and that is not emphasized enough. Universities have often taken the view that the students have come there to be told. They're going to receive a certain amount of lectures. Well, we know that lecturing is not a great way of communication. We need to really turn that around so that the students are there to discover. We also need to get the students to collaborate in a much more proactive and constructive way. I worked for 3 years in Sweden at a university where all the master's dissertations were done by groups of people. When I first saw that, I thought, my goodness, how can you possibly do that? Who knows who contributed to this? Well, actually, the system worked extremely well. The comments from the authors of the papers were frequently critical of the examination system. And the advice is that the examination system needs to be addressed. Lifelong learning is a central issue, and the lifelong learning needs to be coupled tightly with career paths. Of course, there is very much more to be learned than how to do a job. The idea of not being work ready is a very tricky one, and whenever anyone raises that criticism, universities, and I ask them to define work ready, I get some very funny answers indeed. Online learning is definitely with us. It is a very important element, but it is not simply a matter of taking lectures and putting them into a video conferencing platform. There's another issue that has raised its head concerning the duration of degrees, and there is a case to look closely at educating someone slowly, perhaps 1 year at a time with some sort of certification after each one. Something else perhaps than simply a straight 3 years or a straight 4-year run to a bachelor's degree. A number of the authors in the book talked about rebalancing between research and teaching. They talked about the fact that not many lecturers are actually trained to deliver the education that they're trying to do. The word teaching is very questionable in here, and I for one I'm inclined to say that we should get rid of the word teaching and talk about what we do as facilitating learning. We have the issue of the fact that we should disseminate the learning within the university much more broadly. I have audited wonderful courses from Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Caltech that have been put up on the web. There are wonderful courses delivered by many universities around the world, and these should also be on the web. Now, my timer tells me I have very little time left, and so I want to go directly to the very last page. And I want to say 2 things from here. The first one is that we need to restructure the narrative so that nobody believes that a university education is a buyable commodity. I think it was wrong for us to start calling students clients. Education is about co-development between the learner and those who are facilitating it, and that should be emphasized right at the very beginning. The second issue is that we should make it very clear at the beginning of a degree that education alone does not bring success. That success in life is actually driven by each individual's own purpose, motivation, determination to succeed. And this should be emphasized throughout the degree. Students should not be coming to the university to be educated. They should be coming to the university to develop themselves. I hope that's a sufficiently adequate introduction so that we can now move ahead with the other speakers and then get to our discussion. Now, I have a message from Garth, and the message, I presume, is that I can proceed immediately to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Niyi, Professor Niyi from Dubai. He has already been introduced to you. His contribution to the book was a chapter on smart universities, and I'm going to ask him now to pick up that topic and tell us how he sees what can be achieved in that direction. Niyi, can you pick up from here?
Thanks, Dan. Yes, I'm just going to unmute now.
Niyi, my computer tells me that you're muted. Is that right?
So, is this sharing now? I'm on, but I'm not sure if it's sharing currently.
You are sharing, you just need to minimize, maximize your presentation.
I've done that. You can see the slides now.
No, can you stop sharing and then when you share, select your slides?
Sorry. So. Yes.
Niyi, if everybody can see your slides, then just go with them without maximizing them, okay?
Okay, can you see my slides now, though?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Prof. Dan, and for inviting me to this very important webinar. And I'm also grateful to the Vice-Chancellor and staff of UCT for co-hosting the seminar and for the excellent facilitation and coordination of the process. My presentation is titled Reimagining Smart Learning and Smart University Campuses in the post-COVID-19 era. As we all are aware, the COVID-19 pandemic is the biggest health crisis, global health crisis in a century. To date, we have 183 million individuals infected and 4 million deaths. And it has adversely disrupted many aspects of global sectors, global systems, of which the university tertiary or the tertiary education system is one. The functions, the core functions of university, as Prof. Dan mentioned, in terms of personal development and education of staff and members, in terms of serving as cultural hubs and centers for vocational identity in relation to production, dissemination, and application of knowledge, with regards to development of human capital and socioeconomic development. They've all taken a hit as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. But we've seen some light at the end of the tunnel, in the sense that we've got a cohort of fairly effective vaccines, actually very effective vaccines. And the drive towards mitigation, towards elimination approaches rather than mitigation approaches, means that hopefully within the next 24 months, we will be at least have the disease eliminated, not eradicated, eliminated. And that means we've got to start planning ahead. That's what universities do, planning ahead and looking at how we will continue to function in the post-COVID era. In my presentation, I'll be leading discussions on the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on higher education, as well as two aspects that I think will be relevant to how we can restructure, how we can build back better post-2024, as they say here, inshallah. The first will be with regards to developing our campuses as smart campuses, and also developing our learning systems in a smart learning fashion. And I just want to conclude with one aspect of interest with regards to post-COVID universities in terms of their trajectory. Will they still remain true to their names as universities that provide universal, holistic developmental activities, or will they become more and more particularized? That's a point that Prof. Dan has actually alluded to earlier. So we are looking at it in relation to these four areas. When it comes to students, there is the issue of students' mental health, the anxiety, issues of what may be a stripping of what many students perceive as university education. When they say, I'm going to college, it implies actually going into a cultural hub where you meet with others, and that's part of university education. With COVID and online learning, that is stripped, and it's not the only aspects that is stripped. They need to get used to the aspects of technology, the use of technology for learning. And a lot of the learning will depend on the skills and expertise of the facilitators, and also of the technological structure of their universities. So students are actually, especially in countries that are wealthy, many of them are complaining, and like in Australia, they don't want online. They believe that the benefits of being on campus outweigh the narrow benefits or dividends that online learning will provide. With faculty, just very briefly, there's one aspect of COVID-19 burnout. It's a syndrome that has just been coined in the last 8-9 months to talk about exhaustion, anxiety, and the uncertainty of career paths of faculty. We're now having situations in which a lot of seasoned faculty staff are becoming like podcasters, where they present lectures that may be taught in other parts of the world by associate faculty. That has its own implications for job satisfaction and tenure, so to speak. We tend to neglect the administrative and support services in universities. But if you look at most university budgets, at least a quarter goes into these support services. Many of those people, from the cafeterias to hostels. I lived in International House when I was studying at the University of New South Wales in the 80s. And all those will be gone now. So there's a big, while you have that problem, you also have the issue, the other side, the new jobs, non-administrative jobs in cloud computing, in online services manager that may be created. And higher education institutions will now have to shift their budgets and become more allocatively efficient with regards to what really matters. Is it still bricks and mortar? No, I don't think so. We need to now start thinking of new learning platforms that will provide the main avenues for learning in the post-COVID era. So we are hoping that we'll be able to control this disease, not eradicate it, but control it, and universities need to function. One of the two proposals or suggestions that I have is for us to embrace the concept of smart campuses, both for new universities that are being built and for those that are that are already well established. It needs to reimagine the way they operate and operate as smart campuses. These are extensions of smart cities, and they provide new meanings to the notion of going to university. You are no longer going to physically go to university in a smart campus. The college experience will be integrated into digital experience, and it's got a number of attributes. Digitally connected campus using the Internet of Things. There are aspects of energy management, cyber security, because you are now going to be using a lot of connections into your system, and that creates its own risks. So you need to develop a very strong high-tech system. This also gives you, a smart campus gives you opportunities for big data collection and analytics. So we might be going into new areas of research in universities. So smart campus concept is one of the ways by which we can bounce back better in the post-COVID era. The second suggestion is with regards to smart learning. A smart learning environment is a technology-supported learning environment that makes adaptations and provides timely, appropriate, personalized, and contextualized support to learners. It has a number of features. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll just mention one. The ubiquitousness is what, in my view, is the most significant difference between smart learning and the type of learning I underwent when I went into medical school in Nigeria or even in Australia. You now have the opportunity to be able to access knowledge using a number of devices, from the mobile phone to your desktop, at any place in time. So you can still be on holidays and be attending classes. You can be a mother, a nursing mother, and be attending classes. That's one big advantage of what might become the new normal in the post-COVID era. And it's got 4 domains. The learner domain, and Prof. Dan has already mentioned how we need to wake learners up from their passivity and see them as active partners in the generation of knowledge. The academic faculty domain, it's all about training to ensure that they have the teaching presence and to be able to provide. I was attending aspects of the ECL conference, social media conference, and they were talking about edutainment. It's all part of the academic faculty domain to make the sessions interesting, because you are coming from a position of deficit in which the students already are cynical about what smart online learning will provide. So you need to actually go beyond the call of duty in order to make it exciting and to enthuse the learners. There's also the curriculum domain. It's not just a question of we just take what we are doing physically in the University of New South Wales or at the University of Ife where I trained, and then just put it online, because not the way it has to be taught needs to also change. And there are also some challenges with regards to meeting some of the learning objectives in an online forum. I'll just give one example of field practical or internships. We are starting projects on online or virtual internships at my university, but it's still a challenge. It still doesn't feel like the real thing to some of these students. And there's also the learning environment domain. This is where, you know, we need to start with the human capital. These are the most important parts of the learning environment domain. The technology is great, but if you don't have motivated human capital, they will not use that technology. We need to think about the learning management systems, and it's important sometimes to actually have more than one. Depending on the courses, some learning management systems like Moodle or Blackboard Collaborate may work better or not as good depending on the course that is being done. So those are the four major areas of smart learning. So I've given some ideas on, or shared some ideas on how COVID-19 impacts on students, on faculty, on support services, and on university administration in general. And I've proposed two aspects by which we can actually build back better using building smart campuses and operating smart learning techniques. In conclusion, I just want to briefly talk about one of the trajectories of what I think is going to be the post-2024 university system. University, it has the etymology relates to universal, about building in a holistic manner. But with pressures on funding, with pressures on student enrollment that is reducing costs, and with pressures on industry, who wants those who are just in time ready graduates. A lot of universities are actually canceling out all these other factors that lead to a universal education. Foundation courses are being trimmed down. We are now having micro-credentialing becoming the norm in many universities. And that leads to a particularized form of education, which I think may not serve the university of the future very well. We also need to be familiar with the fact that with online learning, the students are losing out on some of the functions of universities that you and I have benefited from. And therefore, we cannot continue to charge. We've got to find a way to tweak the tuition to accommodate that, because they will need to spend money for example, the social cultural ops that is now being replaced by digital technologies. And on that note, I'll stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Niyi. My little clock went off there just at the right time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Professor Lakshmi Nair, and I would just like to say that I first met Professor Nair at the University of Witwatersrand at a conference where she was presenting on her research. And the research involved how to get a much higher level of engagement from a class. And I thought that was exactly what we need in the university of the future. We need to be able to, you know, Niyi said, wake these students up, switch these students on, get them involved in a greater way than they have been involved before. So Lakshmi, over to you.
Thank you, Dan. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you again to Dan, Professor Remenyi, and the Vice-Chancellor for introducing me. And thank you also to the University of Cape Town and its wonderful staff members for inviting me to this great session and facilitating it. It's my pleasure to be here. And let me move on to my presentation. So, yes, it is my pleasure to be here and discuss the topic popular media in classrooms after the pandemic. So as my esteemed colleagues have discussed already, the factors which could affect the university of the future are multiple. And to categorize them broadly, there are institutional factors and individual factors. I am focusing here on the individual factors. For instance, how can we facilitate student learning during the pandemic? In this regard, I am discussing a delivery strategy for education after the pandemic. So during the pandemic, the universities had to move from face-to-face to online learning, either synchronous or asynchronous. So this resulted in the professors having to develop or adopt teaching strategies which are suitable for different modes of teaching. And now that the vaccinations are ongoing and people are getting more and more vaccinated, the universities are preparing to bring back students on campus. However, it is safe to assume that some lessons will still be conducted online. For instance, in the university to which I am affiliated to, Louis Guido Carli, in the case of several subjects, we are planning to do a mix of both face-to-face and online learning in the next academic year. The professors therefore have to prepare suitable teaching strategies for both modes of teaching, and we should do it in such a way that it ensures student engagement, as Professor Remenyi mentioned. And apart from student engagement, it should also help the students to understand the subject matter and also develop capabilities for explicating, interpreting, and building persuasive and critical arguments on the subject matter. So one way of ensuring this would be to use popular media in classrooms. So popular media or popular culture media involves stories, movies, music, games, and television shows. So these are some examples of the popular media which I use in my classrooms. So I use stories like Harry Potter. So here I have included some pictures from the movie, but actually I use the excerpts from the book for the classes. I also use games. So this is a very, very affordable and very nice game, Her Story. It's €5 if you want to purchase it. So anyway, the students don't have to purchase it. I buy them. And then I use it to teach students qualitative coding. I also use movies such as The Circle and Catch Me If You Can. Both of them are Hollywood movies to teach students about ethics. And apart from that, I also use excerpts from TV series like The Good Place, which is about the ethics, and also The Good Wife, which is about legal practices and consent and all that. So I use all these popular media pieces in my classrooms. And why do I use them, and why should universities of the future use them? This is because popular media presents the experiences of the protagonists in narrative forms. And experiences in narrative forms require less cognitive effort to understand. Thus, incorporating popular media into teaching ensures that the students are able to understand the subject matter more thoroughly and clearly with more enthusiasm and engagement. Now, this is not just my opinion, not just my subjective opinion. I wanted to see if the students also liked it. So I'm going to show an example of actually two instances where I adopted this in my classrooms. So as I had mentioned, most of my teaching pertains to qualitative methodological topics. So the main objectives of my classrooms are to give qualitative methodology courses for bachelor and master students. In my current university, I teach business and management students. In my previous university, I used to be affiliated to Utrecht University in the Netherlands. There I was teaching students in social and behavioral sciences, so a larger category of students from education, psychology, interdisciplinary social sciences, and sociology. So the main objectives of the popular media activities in the classrooms were to introduce students to the general features of qualitative research methodology, from formulating the research question to designing, sampling, collecting data, analyzing it, reporting it, ensuring quality, and ensuring ethics. And also to make sure that the students critically think about the set features and are made capable to apply the features in their own studies. So this particular initiative, these activities which involve popular media, it doesn't require much infrastructure. So if you are doing this in a classroom, regardless of whether it is face-to-face or online, we need a computer with internet connection and audio facilities. And if it is in a face-to-face classroom, you might need a projector. if it is a popular media piece like a movie clip or a TV series clip. And if you're using an excerpt from a book or a story, I used to provide PDF copies of those media pieces. And when everything shifted to online format, I used to provide them the same materials without much additional technical facilities required. So I would just project the social media piece, popular media piece on the screens. MS Teams, WebEx, everything supports these kind of activities. Then I wanted to understand how much the students like this. So I conducted a first survey. So this is not in the strictest sense a survey, but I collected qualitative responses from the students about an activity involving Harry Potter. And in general, they really liked it. They thought it was creative and they thought this was not dry anymore. They can critically think and see how what they studied can be applied in different situations. So, and also Harry Potter is very popular and everybody loves it. So it was easy to make students like it. So then I also wanted to see if this worked in other classrooms. So I did a survey this time with 33 respondents about how they perceived an activity involving the movie, The Circle, and I used an excerpt from the movie to teach them about ethics. And as you can see from the responses, majority of the students liked it a great deal or considerably. So to combine these two categories, 87.9% of students enjoyed it, and about 78.8% of students mentioned that this activity helped them understand the topics better, and 66.7% wanted to see it more because they thought it would help them critically think about ethical perspectives in a real life situation. And some students, about 78.8%, were also enthusiastic about the activity while they were doing it. So then I did not just exclude the comments which students, the negative comments of the students. So I also collected qualitative responses from them, so 165 responses, to see why they liked it and what were the things, that they didn't like much. So in general, the things they liked was the visual and comparative element, clarity of the concepts because of the format of the popular media, that it was attractive, relatable, concrete situations, enthusiastic, and so on and so forth. And there were some other comments which were mostly related to the length of the clips or the movie situation being weird, which was actually its purpose. And some students already knew the topic. So those were the students who were not over enthusiastic about the activity, which was actually not much to do with activity per se. So in general, from all these feedback from the students, I understood they liked it, but I also wanted to see how they performed in the classes after this. So I looked through their results, and of course, I cannot claim that the results are purely due to the popular media. There were other strategies in the classroom and the students also worked hard. But compared to the previous years, in 2019, when I conducted this initiative in my classrooms, first started conducting these initiatives in my classroom, I noticed that there are more students who got good grades and more students who passed and got excellent grades when compared to previous years. In fact, we only had 2 students who failed in this class, in this particular class. And so based on all my experiences so far, so I have been using it since 2019, I would say that popular media can be used in a very learner-centric manner. They can contribute to building back better classrooms in an economic and yet interesting manner. So they help in introducing the students to real life situations and preparing them for critically viewing and practically tackling social phenomena. Therefore, in summary, I would like to recommend the inclusion of popular media in the classrooms and universities of the future after the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Lakshmi. I would now like to introduce you to Lord David Willetts. I invited Lord David Willetts to participate in this discussion with us, and I did so not because he is a member of the House of Lords or that he was Minister for Universities in the UK, but I did so because this has been on my desk for the last number of years. It is an extraordinarily good piece of work. I have learned so much from him from that book. It's an outstanding piece of work. When I invited him, I hadn't realized that he was currently the Chancellor of the University of Leicester, nor had I realized the list of honors that he's received over the years, and it's as long as your arm. Also, I want to say that, because I might forget it if I don't say it now, I have just recently listened to him on YouTube on a couple of talks, one of which was on TED, and I would highly recommend that talk to you all. It is an extremely good talk on university education. I asked Lord Willetts if he would be kind enough as to comment on what he's heard from the three of us, but also to make any other comments he wishes on this whole issue of the University of the Future. So over to you.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to join this conference. It's a great privilege. I have happy memories of visiting the University of Cape Town years ago, and it was an honour to be introduced by the Vice-Chancellor. And thank you for what you just said and your kind remarks about my book. So let me very briefly comment on the fantastic contributions you've already had. First of all, Professor Remenyi, your own comments about the changing character of the university. And universities are big, complex organizations. Their budgets are much larger than they were. A large university in Britain now would have a budget of over £1 billion. And they are not really centrally controlled. There's that brilliant definition of the modern university as a group of baronial professors united only by a shared grievance on car parking. And that captures the atmosphere in quite a few modern sprawling universities. But the alternative of an entirely centralized structure like a corporation, I think, would be worse. I think autonomy for the researchers and academics within an institution is also part of the secret of innovation and boldness. Let me turn now to what Professor Niyi said, and I very much agreed with what he said on the smart campus, on smart learning. I do think that the virus has driven more innovation in online education in the past year than we saw in the previous 20 years. I used to say that I thought higher education was a place which had barely been touched by the digital revolution. Although universities are so proud of innovation, when it came to digitization, they were actually rather slow. And we're now seeing a massive catch up. So I agreed with a lot of what he said, but I just add a few comments on it. First of all, I think at the moment the online learning is at the first stage of the digital revolution, which is you do what you used to do before, but do it online. It'll really get exciting when instead of just using online learning to deliver lectures, we actually use the digital experience to innovate in pedagogy, and that is what some organizations are trying to do, including to you, with which this event is associated and for whom I used to be an advisor. So I think innovation in pedagogy is still at its early stages, and it's going to have the potential for us to measure advances in learning and measure which forms of online education are most effective in promoting learning, way beyond what has been possible using old technologies. I think an omission, if I may say so, from what Professor Niyi said, and I think one of the big constraints is that compared with medicine, the debate about what can be done with pupil data and what the ethical constraints are is very simple and primitive in higher education. And whilst we're very aware of very lively debates about exactly how patient data can be used, we're there's much less discussion of how student data can be used. But can a university track an individual student's educational performance from the work they're submitting online and link it to the evidence it's got from when he or she is perhaps using their key card to access the library, or when he or she is using their key card to access the student bar? Can they link it to information they may have on how they spend their student loans? So I think there's a lot of sensitive issues which need to be debated and are barely discussed at the moment. And then finally, on the data revolution, I think that what we have seen in Britain is the digital revolution has also led to disintermediation. A lot of intermediaries, notably physical retail stores, have lost out. Will the digital revolution disintermediate universities? Will people be able to put their completed programs straight onto their LinkedIn profile without needing to have the stage of getting a university degree attached to their name? And if I were a university, I'd be worried about disintermediation, about going straight from the completion of a specific online course to a job application to Microsoft without the university graduation ceremony in between. And I would be wanting to be innovative in the ways in which people could learn with me so as to head off that threat. We then heard about innovations in teaching. And I thought I was fascinated as well in what Dr. Nair said, and I loved her examples of using popular culture. I myself think that, and again, this goes right back to what we heard at the beginning, but I think that I want to see a rebalancing towards teaching. Certainly my analysis of what we had in Britain was an enormously competitive environment for high quality research, but much weaker metrics and much weaker incentives when it came to teaching. And although Professor Remenyi is a bit of a skeptic about perhaps about the fees and loans that I introduced, I did see it, and of course students don't pay them up front, it's really a graduate repayment scheme. I did think the fact that a student brought money with him or her for their education increased accountability for the quality of the teaching. And similarly, we have established that there is a contract to deliver a service, and a contract to deliver a service, namely you've got to educate me, is a powerful strengthening of the student voice when they press for a high quality academic experience. Students are not just consumers. Education is different from consumption, but some of the framework of information and choice and legal rights which come with contracts in a consumer system, I think can be used to strengthen the student voice. Let me just end, because we're in danger of running out of time, with two other observations I would add to what's already been said. Certainly in Britain, I think that universities can do a lot more to stay in touch with their graduates and become vehicles for lifelong learning, rather than saying goodbye to you at the age of 21 or 22, not even keeping an email address to stay in touch. American universities have always done this. Of course, they're mainly in order to collect money from their graduates, but nevertheless, they do it very energetically. Hence the great observation that if only Osama bin Laden had been to Harvard, then the Americans would have found him within a couple of weeks. But the Americans do track their graduates in a way that many other universities don't. Staying in touch with your graduates, offering them refresher courses, seeing how their careers are panning out, seeing if you can provide useful services in the years of their adulthood, I think is a very useful thing to universities to do. And the other thing I would put at the end of my list is the civic mission of universities, which we haven't touched on so far. They are global institutions, but if they're not rooted in their cities, in their towns, then they lose out. Universities should use their knowledge of what's happening in the world to contribute to the improvement of the quality of life of the people physically living near them. And I think if they did that, they would find they had an even greater position in our hearts and greater public support than they do at the moment. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. That really was excellent. Thank you. I am at this particular moment not entirely sure where we go from here, because this discussion was scheduled for 1 hour. Starting at 3:30 South African time, and it is now 4:28 South African time. So there is theoretically 2 minutes left. However, I had said to Mehdi before that this event should really have been an hour and a half, and she had said to me that we could overrun and have some questions afterwards. Is that not true, Mehdi? Can we do that?
Yes, I'm with you, and certainly let's take 10 minutes for questions, and if there are very many, we make it 15, and then at the end I will then just hand over to me to thank everybody, and as we agreed, you would deal with the questions.
Rightio. So as I understand it, and by the way, everybody should know that I'm not a skilled user of Team. I'm a Zoom user, but I'm going to try. So in the box that has the first question, is it possible for you to send us the slides? Well, my slides are available, and I will give you an email address as we end. I think each individual person needs to decide. Second question, how is failure viewed in the University of the Future narrative? Failure. You know, that question needs a little bit of an explanation. I'm really not terribly sure how to handle that. Would Lord Willetts, would you like to try to handle that, or Lakshmi, would you like to handle that?
Well, of course, there are different senses of failure, and universities have complex missions. One form of failure would be simply if students leave university without having had their lives transformed by becoming thinkers in their own right. And I think a big issue, a growing issue in universities, is a failure to distinguish between university education and school education. You're not there simply to be taught, you're there to become an independent learner. There's an increasing debate in Britain on graduate earnings, and another more narrow form of failure is if students graduates don't have the benefit of a successful career afterwards. And then thirdly, there's the public benefit, the wider benefits of many graduates, which is everything from greater civic engagement, greater likelihood of voting, through to increasing propensity to volunteer. So there's lots of different ways in which universities can help people, and so there's lots of different ways where they may fail to achieve what we hope.
It has just occurred to me that that question might have been related to something that I encountered in South Africa when I was teaching there in recent years, and there was a call among certain students which said, if you pass one, you have to pass all. Well, that just doesn't work. I mean, there has to be a certain level of achievement acquired before the university should award the degree. So I think failure is an intrinsic part of testing, is an intrinsic part of a university, and it has to. The next question was to do with the word teaching, and it comes from a man who also contributed to the book, and he says he likes the word teacher and teaching, and doesn't quite like the way that I handled it. That perhaps I should have made the point that teaching should be different. I find the word teaching quite problematic, to be perfectly honest. You know, I can imagine the old Victorian schoolmaster saying, "I'll teach you to be cheeky," or something like that. All right, if you want to use it, but I prefer to try to create a learning environment for my students. Now, what have we got next here? How do you better equip students to have better agency of their learning journey, rather than expected to be a transaction in which they are paying the university for an education? Well, my immediate reaction to that is really the last point that I made, which is that, you know, success is to do with you, to do with what you come to the university to achieve. Success is to do with your drive to learn, for self-development and self-improvement, and that is how you really try to turn people on. You say, look, you can be the best educated person. You can learn an awful lot of things. You can learn a lot of facts. You can learn a lot of information, but unless you have got the drive to be able to do something with it. Now, we're going to give you the opportunity of acquiring that information, acquiring that knowledge, but we're also going to encourage you to do something with it. I mean, that's how I see that. What would you say, Lord Willis?
Well, in the English model, which is very different from America, where the payment really is often a genuine commercial payment, in the British model, where you're provided by the government with a loan, which you then spend at the university of your choice if it will admit you, I personally think that type of transaction actually increases student agency. It makes students more powerful in the system. It enables students to say, I know you have £9,000 for my education, And I don't feel that I've had enough contact time with lecturers, or I think that the seminars have been very crowded and the lectures have been very crowded, given that this is the money that is being spent on my education. So although there's much more to education than that, I personally see it as empowering. And I think it has led to improvements in the academic culture in our universities, so that there is increased student engagement in the design of courses, efforts to do even simple things. When we looked at what students are unhappy about, it's things like how long it takes to get academic feedback on work that they've submitted. Those are now measured in student satisfaction metrics. We publish the metrics university by university. They know that they need to do better on that. So I think university is not just a transaction, it's much wider than that, but we can harness some of the features of a transactional contractual model actually to strengthen the student voice and agency.
The next question is how people have different abilities. How does the University of the Future cater for different abilities and performance of people? Lakshmi, would you like to try that one? How do you cope with a class with a whole lot of different people at different levels?
Okay, yes, thank you, Dan. So what I do in my classrooms is most of my classes are in the master's level, and the students are graded on different aspects. So there will be an individual grading done, but there is also a group grade, which is the predominant grade in my classrooms. So in that, and there will be activities like project work where the students have to work together. And of course, the individual contributions will be monitored in some manner, but that's not the exact focus. So by doing this group activities, what happens is that students realize what are the skills they are really good at, and those students take responsibility of such activities, and the others, often I have seen sometimes that it doesn't work, but 98% of the times the other students learn from each other. So the students are actually provided feedback at 3 different levels. So one is through the grades and the qualitative feedback, which I give with the grades. The other one is feedback from their peers. So by doing this peer feedback activity within the classroom, the students are enabled not only to work on what they're doing, but also to see what others are doing and to, engage in this kind of exchange with each other. So that's how I manage it. Of course, it wouldn't make a student who is really not interested in qualitative research fall in love with it, but at the same time I have seen that students who were very aloof in the beginning gradually grew to love it because of this kind of ecosystem in the classrooms.
Right. The next question I have here is, what type of academic development is envisaged for academic staff and students to function effectively in the new university? At present, in the developing context, much of our focus is on digital literacy competency, but surely we need to think beyond that. I would completely agree with that. I think digital literacy and competency is of course required, but we need to develop in our faculty a much greater understanding of learning processes. And we also need to develop in them a much greater understanding of how to inspire people. I was at a meeting once in at Wits. I had a chair in Wits for a number of years, and I was on a committee that appointed the best lecturer of the year for the faculty. And we got around this discussion, and in the middle of it, I felt it wasn't going anywhere. And I said, well, if we're going to have the best lecturer of the year, let's talk about what the best lecture might be. And someone said, well, a really good lecture is, and they rattled off about 10 characteristics, technical characteristics of what a lecture might become. And I said, I really actually believe that's a load of nonsense. I always get myself into trouble by telling people they're talking nonsense. I think a lecture is about inspiring students to want to learn. And that is really what it's about. It's an opportunity for the faculty to show that it's really worthwhile to learn something about this subject and that they should be engaged. And that, I'm afraid, is not very common. Lakshmi or Lord Willetts, would you like to comment on that? Lakshmi.
So the question is about the digital, including the digital.
Yeah, what should we? How should we inspire? How should we inspire faculty to be better lecturers? What should we tell them to do?
Okay, so
difficult question.
There was this thing, so I'll talk about something which I experienced. So when I was employed in Netherlands, when I joined, there were very strict teaching evaluations which were given by the students to the professors, and actually the professors were terrified of students and that they would give bad evaluations. Really terrified, and it was very new to me because I come from India, where the power dynamic is the opposite, and then I also did my PhD in Switzerland, where also, although not as much as in India, the power dynamic was the other way around. But this is what I noticed during my first years in Netherlands, that it was the other way around, and professors were like that. But what they eventually did is that they changed the evaluation from these numerical technical categories and students putting in numbers or checking on a particular scale. Rather, they made the teaching evaluations more open-ended. So this actually helped in a way, because then we could understand more why the students are saying certain things, or why they are giving you very poor and regarding teaching quality or something like that. And this also helped in another way, because then, because we found that if you ask a student, do you think this teacher is qualified enough to teach this course? That's like a leading question. And if they don't really like you, it's possible they say no. But if it's left to open, we saw that there were more substantial comments, and most of them were something you could work on and improve your classes. Of course, there were some comments like saying coming at 9 a.m. to learn methodology is not good, I would rather sleep. So, but those kind of things were there, but we also got many points where we could work on and improve ourselves as professors.
Thank you. Lord Willett, what would you say to that?
I haven't got. I would like to add to what you practitioners have said. I very much agree with what Lakshmi has just said.
Right. Let's go down and see what else we have here. This is an interesting one. Clearly, differences in online teaching revolves around volume and immediacy. Doesn't this mean that the number of universities and academics will dramatically reduce? Lord Willetts.
Yes, a very interesting question. And then sadly, I am going to have to disappear in a moment. That is one model. If you remove the constraints on size so that it's possible to do a degree at a prestigious university anywhere in the world, and thousands of people can do it, you may see that happen. However, the counter argument is that if you expect some levels of direct teacher engagement, which I think is even expected for online courses, there are actually still size constraints. And moreover, there is such a surge in demand for education that I can see, supply needs to grow rapidly just to match demand. What I think we could see is more modular programs with people putting together, if there's a well-regarded program run by a particular university that becomes well recognized by employers, you could find thousands, tens of thousands of students doing that particular module. But they may, for other modules, go to a different institution, and they may still want to have links to a local institution. As I said, I'm going to have to go in a moment, but can I thank you for letting me join? And Dan, thank you very much for your shameless plug for my book, A University Education. You were so generous about it, I don't need to give it a plug myself, but I touch on these issues in that book.
Yes, you do indeed. And thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you.
Nice.
I'm going to hand this now back over to Mehdi to take it over. I would just like to say in parting that if anybody wants a copy of my slides, please contact me. I am dan.remenyi and the simplest email address is @gmail.com. And if you want the other speaker slides, please let me know, and I will pass your message on to them as well. Mehdi, it's over to you.
Thank you, Dan. Just on a practical note, it might be easier for you if everybody sent their slides to you and you send them to us, and then we can spare you trouble and we can email it out to all participants.
If you like, whatever you like.
That will save you a lot of trouble. So everybody can just send it to the ems@uct.ac.za address. In fact, let me just think properly. We will automatically send out to everybody the link to the talk and the slides of those who wish to share them. That's what we'll do. Okay, so now it remains my pleasure to thank everybody and for both participating and for listening. This has been a most fascinating and stimulating discussion. So thank you to each of our panelists, Professor Remenyi, Dr. Nair, Lord Willetts, and Professor Awofeso for their thoughtful contributions today. I also, in particular, thank Professor Remenyi for initiating the webinar and for inviting the other panelists. I thank you for sponsoring the event. Discussions like this tend to spark ideas in the minds who are listening in. So I thank each of you who's joined us today and hope the ideas have sparked new ideas. Thank you, everybody. And if anybody wants to stay on just for a few minutes to touch base, you can do that. Otherwise, I will be writing to you to thank you formally. And thank you and have a good evening, everybody.